Good evening to you. Nice to see you. Welcome back. So, yeah, thank you for being here. And let's kick it off straight away and get straight into some motivation and refuge bodhicitta for those who are Buddhist inclined. Is that okay? Yeah? Cool. Let's do that. So, find a comfortable position. We'll get ourselves ready for a meditation type of, setting a motivation, but through a meditation. And remember a straight back, so not resting back against the chair, but you want to have feet flat on the floor if you're sitting in a chair, cross-legged on the floor, but a straight back's important. And all the tips you learned from module 2. And then what we can do is we'll go to the refuge bodhicitta area, and what we can imagine is seated before us and actually feel as if you are in the presence of Shakyamuni Buddha. And so you can visualize the Buddha before you. He only has compassion for us, and he's extremely pleased with how we're going and trying to use our life for the benefit of others. And so whatever problems we experience on a day-to-day basis, any suffering, unhappiness, difficulties, accidents, any sort of pain, illnesses, insecurities, low self-esteem, all of these things, separation from our loved ones, throughout the day, not getting what we want and getting what we don't want. And whatever we do get never brings that lasting satisfaction. And so whatever challenges we face, moment to moment, depression, conflict, anxiety, whatever we experience, as well as all the moments of joy and love and laughter, pleasure, these are all created through causes, our true origins, true causes of why we suffer, whether it be suffering of pain or the suffering of change, those temporary happinesses we experience. And this is all because we are under the control of karma and afflictions. They are the true origins of why we suffer, or whatever we experience, contaminated happiness even. Most of the results we experience in this life have come from past lives' causes, and we're creating future lives' causes with whatever we do with our body, speech, and mind, whatever we say, do, and think. So in this way, we're perpetuating our suffering in samsara, which will be endless. But don't end meeting or switch screens or log off right now, because there is hope. Because these experiences are caused, then we can stop the causes. We can counter or oppose the causes, developing true paths, which will bring about our true cessation, our liberation, ultimate happiness. So in this way, mind is the creator of our happiness as well as our unhappiness. Mind is foremost, mind is chief. Because karma and afflictions is an internal process. This is the good news because it means that we can counter karma and afflictions internally. So it's within our control. This is amazing. We have this precious human rebirth, so we have all the leisure and fortune in this very life, right here, right. I'm not sure when I dropped out, so I was just talking about the middle scope and how we have the opportunity to develop the three higher trainings: ethics, concentration, and wisdom, which in turn will weaken our afflictions, suppress them, and eventually eradicate them. But doing all of this for ourselves, alone, our own liberation, is not enough, far from enough. Every quality and realization we develop, every virtue we create, comes about in dependence on others. And therefore to leave them in their own suffering state, endlessly wandering in samsara, is unconscionable. And so we can grow a sense of great confidence, a braveness, a courage to even take responsibility to bring about their happiness, temporary and lasting, to bring them to enlightenment, free of all mistakes, fully realized. But to do that, we need to achieve enlightenment ourselves. And so for the purpose of bringing sentient beings to enlightenment, we can engage in study, listening to the teachings, reflection and meditation to develop these qualities within ourselves. And so for that purpose, bearing in mind the three principal aspects of the path, how all this is possible due to emptiness, because there's the reason, because things are empty of inherent existence, means they can change, that they depend. We can transform our minds, our current state. We can bring about liberation and enlightenment because the nature of our mind is pure. And so for this purpose, we can go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, which exists in another's continuum already, where they've actualized the very qualities we seek. And in dependence on our reliance on them, we can generate our own true paths, true cessations in our own continuum. If you'd like to join me, feel free. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. And so we looked last week at, or actually even in the last several weeks, we've looked at all of these topics already. And we're currently still going through the graduated stages of the path to enlightenment, the Lam Rim, as compiled for our benefit by Lama Atisha. And I'd like to look at the great scope today. And we are still looking at the Four Noble Truths in a sense, because what we're looking at is developing true paths. We looked at last week renunciation. Next week, we'll look at the correct view, wisdom realizing emptiness of inherent existence. And today I want to focus on the bodhicitta side. So these are true paths if they're in the continuum of an Arya being, someone on the path of seeing onwards. Now, these three principal aspects of the path, renunciation, bodhicitta, and correct view, as you know, they can be developed firstly in a contrived way. And like, say, renunciation, when it becomes uncontrived, we enter the path of accumulation of the hero or solitary realizer vehicle. If we develop uncontrived bodhicitta, then we'll enter the Mahayana, the bodhisattva vehicle, the Mahayana path of accumulation. So on the path of accumulation, path of preparation, although they're uncontrived, these bodhicitta minds and so forth, the three principal aspects of the path even, so they're not yet true paths. They only become a true path when they're in the continuum of a noble being, an Arya being, a superior being, someone on the path of seeing, path of meditation, and path of normal learning is an Arya as well. Okay, so I want to look at like that, and also to look at how we can use bodhicitta in our daily life. So with that in mind, let's have a look at the great scope. And the method here, I've written there, the method is the courage to fight the war. So the wisdom, the weapon is the same. Whether we're achieving liberation or enlightenment, it's the same wisdom, the wisdom realizing the lack of inherent existence, the wisdom realizing emptiness. But the courage that it takes to fight the war with this method in the great vehicle is, even more great than the method of the middling scope, where we had renunciation as the main method. So that was to achieve our own liberation. Here we're looking at achieving liberation, as in greater liberation, enlightenment, for all sentient beings, to bring them to that state. So it's an even more magnified courage that it takes to pursue the great scope, the great vehicle. I'd like to also just show you this quote. Lama Atisha, so let me just make sure I can see. So Lama Atisha, he was talking about this quote, which is really quite beautiful. He says in the Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, the text that's compiled these 84,000 teachings into the progression of the Lam Rim, the three scopes. He says, wisdom without skillful means, and skillful means too without wisdom, are referred to as bondage. Therefore, do not give up either. Now, this is interesting because wisdom without skillful means, without developing things like bodhicitta, for instance, he's saying wisdom without bodhicitta is bondage. So how would that even be possible? And he's saying that skillful means, bodhicitta, the six perfections and so forth, without wisdom is bondage. So what he's getting at here is whether we develop the wisdom without the bodhicitta and achieve liberation, he's calling that bondage. So liberation would be bondage, because we would be in a state of this, like, say, blissful meditative equipoise, and we'd be so habituated to that, even for eons in meditation and so forth, that even if we then eventually entered the Mahayana vehicle to achieve enlightenment, because the Buddhas are tapping us on the shoulders and saying, oi, you've still got mistakes. When you're not in meditative equipoise, things appear mistakenly to you as if they were inherently existent or truly existent, because you still have knowledge obscurations, that which hinders your enlightenment. So they still have mistaken appearances. They haven't fully developed all realizations. They haven't developed great compassion. They haven't developed bodhicitta, great loving kindness as well, great equanimity. They haven't developed, the six perfections. There's still so much to develop in their minds. And because if they have achieved liberation before entering the Mahayana, when they do go into meditative equipoise, they're so habituated that they will stay in that meditative equipoise for a lot longer than a bodhisattva would normally, right? Because the bodhisattva needs to come out of the meditative equipoise to accumulate masses of merit, to take back into the meditation, combined the merit, the method and wisdom, to be able to eventually chip away and totally remove all knowledge obscurations. So if you've set up a habit by attaining liberation prior, then your enlightenment, even once you enter the bodhisattva vehicle, is going to be so much more delayed. So bondage is referring to wisdom without the bodhicitta and the six perfections and achieving this liberation. You don't want to stay stuck. I think it's in Guru Puja and various other places, in the complacency of nirvana. Okay. And skillful means, if we practice bodhicitta, the six perfections, if we practice this method side of the bodhisattva vehicle, but we do it without the wisdom, realizing emptiness, we'll never get out of samsara. So therefore, that's bondage. So I really like this quote. And yeah, I found it for years now. It's just so beautiful. So hopefully that's okay to share with you. It's pretty precious. So yeah, we don't want to give up either. We don't want to give up wisdom or skillful means, but we want to bring them together and combine them so that the wisdom is common, whether we achieve liberation or enlightenment, it's common. If we have wisdom with renunciation, that's going to go to liberation. If we have the wisdom with the bodhicitta, then it's going to go to enlightenment. But we cannot have bodhicitta without renunciation. Renunciation, remember, is looking at, it's self-compassion. It's wanting to leave behind samsara and its causes. So it's wanting to leave behind true origins, karma and afflictions, which bring about true suffering. And it wants to leave that behind and go to the direction of liberation. How? Developing true paths, which will bring that cessation, that ultimate cessation of liberation. So yeah, it's pretty special. Anyway, so that's probably enough to do some value to the meaning of that. So let's look at the great scope. We've covered junior school and high school, so congratulations, you're now ready to graduate, and off we go to basically university level. Well done. And in the great scope here, what we're looking at is developing the mind of enlightenment and practicing the six perfections. So in the earlier scopes, the lower scope and the middling scope, these are in common. So remember, these are the stages that we need to follow, and they're common with developing the great scope to become a bodhisattva and achieve enlightenment. We cannot leave them behind. But as we saw, achieving our own happiness, whether it be good future rebirths, is, like a human or a god, was still stuck in samsara, and we continue to suffer. And even if we achieve the goal of the middle scope to achieve liberation, that liberation is for one self alone, one being out of like 8 billion humans, but numberless sentient beings. Yeah, just if you could count the number of insects and animals as well as the humans, it would be inconceivable, But there are other 6 realms of existence that we're talking about in samsara. So achieving our own happiness, one being's happiness, is really not that great, considering all of the kindness others show us on a day-to-day basis, as well as for all the realizations we achieve. And so what we want to do is we need to go beyond the middle scope goal of liberation, but we need to recognize our own state of suffering, its causes, and want to become free of that, right? To achieve liberation. We could call it great liberation when we think of liberation, because that's our goal, enlightenment, great liberation. So we do need to recognize that we are under the control of karma and afflictions, our own samsara, and to go beyond that by developing true paths that bring about true cessations. And that's essential. So that's renunciation. That's essential if we are going to develop bodhicitta. You cannot have bodhicitta without renunciation. You cannot wish for all sentient beings to be free of suffering when you don't even acknowledge your own suffering and the level of suffering, the subtlety of suffering that we experience, and wanting to be free of that. So the biggest obstacle to developing renunciation is being lured in by, all of the contaminated happiness. And we need to go beyond wanting to even give up that. We need to give up the pervasive suffering of conditionality, the third kind of suffering. So yeah, if we come to see that just like me, this is a key phrase, just like me, all sentient beings suffer. So this just like me is a really great way of equalizing ourselves and others, putting ourselves on the same level instead of the self-importance that we usually conduct ourselves with. And so if we can come to see the faults of our samsara, the causes, karma and afflictions, how we suffer under the control of that, then we can transfer the spotlight, which is going to, be the spotlight on ourselves and our own suffering and wishing to achieve liberation. We turn that wishing to be free of true origins and true suffering for oneself alone, we turn that spotlight out to all others, and now wishing all sentient beings to be free of true origins and true suffering. So it's like that. So we all have the potential for liberation, and we're all entirely dependent on sentient beings. We're in the same situation, and so we need to recognize their immeasurable kindness over countless eons of beginningless lives, and look at not only freeing ourselves, but also freeing all sentient beings. So to do this, we need masses of merit. Okay, so therefore we need to practice these 6 perfections, things like generosity, morality, patience, joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom. And so if we can practice these, then they will not only benefit sentient beings through doing such actions of, giving everything from material, objects to love and protection, and giving dharma and so forth. Whatever giving benefits sentient beings, and it benefits ourselves by accumulating great merit, because when we give, we do an action on behalf of all sentient beings. So, our actions are become imbued with a bodhicitta motivation. And so it's as if all sentient, say we're offering a stick of incense to a Buddha statue. It's incredibly vast. We can think that that stick of incense doesn't belong to me. It belongs to every living being, limitless sentient beings. And so we can imagine offering that one stick of incense to the Buddha on behalf of limitless sentient beings. And so the merit is going to be quite limitless. We can extend it even beyond that, where we can offer it for their very enlightenment. May they abide in morality and so forth, all the way up to enlightenment. We can offer it to not only one Buddha, who's inseparable, let's say, from our gurus, then it becomes even higher merit. But we can imagine offering it on behalf of limitless sentient beings to every Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, statue, scripture, stupa, relic, tanka, all of these things of the past, present, and future, of the 10 directions. So the merit, it just blows your mind. And every action that a bodhisattva would do on the great scope, even their breath, is used for sentient beings. So every action, every moment of mind, it's all directed towards the benefiting sentient beings. And these 6 perfections, I think it was Chandrakirti or Lama Tsongkhapa, certainly in the Middle Way studies, he mentioned the first 3, generosity, morality, and patience. These are best suited. They're easier to practice for the householder bodhisattva. Okay, probably because, the bodhisattva in the household situation has income and so forth, and is giving you material goods and so forth like that, non-harmfulness. Even I'll talk more about this towards the end, I hope, bringing these 6 perfections into relationships. And if you are with a partner practicing morality, you are not only not harming others, but with this great scope, you're also benefiting them, right? So you wouldn't engage in actions like, sexual misconduct, having adultery, having affairs with other people, even at an emotional level, of course, physical as well. So we'll talk about practice of the 6 perfections in relationships towards the end. So therefore, the bodhisattva who's a monastic, it's easier to practice the concentration and wisdom. Now, the 4th one I've missed out because that's applicable to both the first 3 of the householder bodhisattva and the latter 2, concentration wisdom, of the monastic ordained bodhisattva. You need joyous effort to practice any of those perfections. Now, the first 3, generosity, morality, and patience, these go towards the collection of merit to achieve the Buddha's form body. And then you can imagine like the joyous effort is like this wind that's, setting forth the sails of that boat to enlightenment. And then for the monastic, the concentration and wisdom, with the joyous effort supporting that, these go towards the collection of wisdom, which we need as the cause for the Dharmakaya, the wisdom truth body. So you cannot practice just the householder bodhisattva perfections, because you need not only the form body of a Buddha, but the Dharmakaya. You need not only the Rupakaya, but the Dharmakaya. You need all 6 perfections, and you can try to practice all 6 within one perfection. So this is also possible. All right, so basically our generosity is going to help us because it'll overcome miserliness. And we know, hungry ghosts are, their main affliction would be miserliness. We need the morality, the discipline to not harm, but in the bodhisattva vehicle, more than just not harming others is benefiting them. And then we need the patience to overcome our intolerance. And as you know, patience destroys anger and so forth. And we need the joyous effort to overcome our laziness, and concentration to overcome distraction, and wisdom to overcome ignorance. So we need all these 6 perfections. Now, we are aiming for enlightenment with this great scope, but following the perfection vehicle is going to take 3 countless great eons. So a very long time. So with Tantra, even more strengthened is that bodhicitta that wishes to achieve enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings, even more quickly than the perfection vehicle, and even more quickly than the lower tantras, action tantra, performance, and yoga tantra. So quickly wishing to achieve enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings. There's a great urgency, because the more delayed our enlightenment, the more delayed sentient beings are in samsara, where they're suffering. So it's even a greater strength to this bodhicitta. All right, so okay, undergraduate and postgraduate studies. And remember, for homework, we've been doing how our resultant happiness, how we're getting happier and happier as we proceed through the 3 scopes. So hopefully we'll look at that next week or during one of our breaks in the meditation sessions in the retreat weekend. So do have those how are we increasing our happiness, and how are we applying that verse of the Buddha, do not commit non-virtuous actions, perform only virtuous actions, subdue your own mind thoroughly. This is teaching the Buddha. How is that verse relating to each of the three scopes? So we'll look at that around the same time, either next week or in our retreat session. So have your answers ready. Okay, so if we're going to achieve this mind of enlightenment, of the great scope, then it's not going to, we're not going to achieve enlightenment in one lifetime if it takes 3 countless great eons following the perfection vehicle. Although it is true that you can, in the highest Yoga Tantra, achieve enlightenment in this very, very short lifetime of this degenerate age. Even I think they say within 3 years, 3 months, maybe 3 days, that is possible. But is it likely for someone like ourselves? Congratulations, if so. For someone like myself, it's going to take more than just one lifetime or more than just 3 years. So therefore, what makes bodhicitta difficult to realize, so it's easier to understand than, say, wisdom realizing emptiness, but it's easier to get the realization of the wisdom realizing emptiness than it is to get the realization of bodhicitta. Because, with this bodhicitta, we are going to need to understand and accept past and future lives. And so we're going to need many future lives to be able to develop the mind of enlightenment and accomplish the 6 perfections and so forth. And we're going to need to remember past lives existing, because we're going to need to come to an awareness that all sentient beings have been our mother. So this is where we can run into some of the challenges. All right, what have I got on this slide? Engage in essential practice leading to goals. Okay, so the great capable being, looking at that third scope, the great scope, what they're wanting to be separated from or to avoid or fear, if you're comfortable with that word, bearing in mind it's an intelligent fear, a healthy fear, what they fear, this being fears other sentient beings suffering, So that's no longer just fearing the lower realms, or no longer just fearing, one's own suffering in samsara in any of the 6 realms, but now we're fearing other sentient beings who are stuck in samsara and suffering and undergoing, inconceivable tortures and so forth in various realms of existence and like that. So that's what they fear, sentient beings suffering for even a single moment. Sometimes it's been explained that they can fear that this being would fear knowledge obscurations. Why? Because knowledge obscurations is what hinders enlightenment. So, they fear the knowledge obscurations that keep them from achieving enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. So that can be explained in 2 different ways I've seen. The main method is this bodhicitta, the wish to achieve enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings. And the main practice is the 6 perfections. So before was renunciation and the 3 higher trainings. And so here we're looking at bodhicitta in the practice of the 6 perfections. Isolating out of the 3 higher trainings, or in this case, the 6 perfections, isolating out the wisdom, the 6th perfection. So here we're looking at wisdom realizing emptiness. Emptiness of what? It's not nothingness. We'll look at this next week. Emptiness of independent existence, things existing in and of themselves independently, unrelated to other, unrelated to being dependent on parts, cause and conditions, the mind that labels it and so forth. And the goal is enlightenment. Okay, so then I want to look at this quote here, and then you guys had some homework which you can share. So Lama Atisha says here, those who through their personal suffering truly want to end completely all the suffering of others are persons of supreme capacity. So last week, I gave you some homework. I'm not sure if you did it, and don't worry if you didn't. We can just go on. But last week, I gave you some homework in the chat, which was how can renunciation help us to develop greater compassion and empathy for others? You remember? So I just want to change the view so I can see more people easily. So in other words, how does your own experience of suffering help you to develop compassion for others? Did anyone think about that? Anyone? Oh, great. Thank you, Terry. Would you like to share some of your insights? Thank you.
Sure. By being aware of our own suffering, we can realize the suffering of others. Also, the realization that many, many people suffer far worse than I do. Some people live where they are not free to practice Dharma or any other religion. There are many areas where people and animals do not have safe drinking water or enough healthy food. With all this in mind, it allows us to have greater compassion and empathy for others. Just like me, everyone suffers, and for many, far worse than I do.
Thank you. Thank you. That's lovely. I see you've gone back to which is correct. I see how you've brought in the small scope as well there, like precious human rebirth and all and the freedoms and richnesses, and how, because you're right, the small scope does relate to us developing renunciation as well. And we do want to be free of the suffering of pain and so forth, and then going beyond that suffering of change, which is really difficult to want to. I had a hurdle in a retreat doing this. Why would I want to free somebody of their temporary happiness? It felt so wrong, because it's like that's all we enjoy with samsara is temporary happiness. Why do I want to take that away from them? But of course, while they had that second suffering of change, their temporary happiness, contaminated happiness, they're still going to be involved with samsara and maybe creating more causes through craving and grasping and so forth, right? So they're perpetuating samsara. And then even going beyond that to look at the third type of suffering, that while they had that ticking time bomb, then they're going to be perpetuating samsara with suffering of change or suffering of pain coming any moment. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, Terry. That's really good. Some good insights and some good background knowledge, and going forward even to just like me, bringing in that phrase is really excellent. So thank you. Anyone else would like to contribute? How does your own experience of suffering help you develop compassion for others? I know when I had shingles, remember I told you I had shingles a couple of weeks ago? I told you that I had it, for a lengthy time. I was on a cocktail of drugs, about 8 different drugs every day. So it wasn't a good period. And it lasted about more than a year, maybe a year and a half. Through that experience of my own suffering, it put me in touch. Like I never explained suffering before as excruciating. And having shingles was excruciating pain. So it put me in touch with my own suffering and wanting to be free of it. But then the mind of compassion arose because I wouldn't want anybody else to undergo that level of pain of shingles, and particularly the vulnerable, for them to experience it, even more compassion for them. So from our own experience of suffering, not only does it help us deal with it at the time, okay, because there are techniques we can do like Tonglen, which I'd like to explain this session as well. We can take on the suffering of all sentient beings who would ever be likely to experience this suffering that I'm already experiencing, having shingles at that time. And we can imagine I'm already suffering, so why not give it to me? Let me take on every single living being suffering so that they don't need to experience it. And we develop a brave heart. And what happens is we stop focusing on me and my suffering and I'm so, miserable. And then we start to embrace all sentient beings. And what happens is we are no longer experiencing the suffering at an excruciating level where it's paralyzing us, but our heart's going out to others, and it's almost like by wanting to take on their suffering, it's like our suffering diminishes, you know? So we grow this big heart that encompasses all living beings. And that's just from experiencing our own pain and suffering. I'm sure I haven't had yet anyway, cancer, but I'm sure people who have had cancer, and going through chemo, and they know what it's like. I can only imagine what it's like. But, when they're going through chemo and then they're getting sick and all of these sort of things and that no energy, I imagine they can easily have compassion for somebody else on a similar journey. So that's how our own experience, our suffering, can help us develop that compassion. Do you see what I'm saying? So if we can develop renunciation that sees even that third kind of suffering, the most subtle, pervasive suffering, pervasive in all realms of samsara, that pervasive suffering of conditionality, whereby we take these contaminated aggregates, body and mind, under the control of karma and afflictions. If we can get in touch with our own level of suffering at that level, then we will be able to generate the great compassion that recognizes all living beings are in the same situation as us. Do you see how the own suffering is related to others? So this is why we have to develop this mind of renunciation to go beyond that, to turn the spotlight from self to others, and to develop the wish that they all be free of suffering and its causes. That's the meaning of compassion. So it's great compassion when it's in relation to all sentient beings, wanting them to be free of suffering and its causes, wanting them to have happiness in its causes, great love, and even beyond that, wanting to bring them to enlightenment. All right, so let's have a look at where we're going next. Let's go back to... Okay, we can get some misconceptions around bodhicitta, you know? So sometimes we think it's this, highly emotional state and, it's really a sentimental mind. It's nothing like this at all. And it's not even where you're overwhelmed by the suffering of all living beings and then you become, incapacitated or so overwhelmed that you're, get upset and, so because quite often we say when we have compassion, if we're working in difficult environments, our compassion can become too much sometimes and we can feel a bit paralyzed, right? Upset and overwhelmed. So this would not be the great compassion that we're talking about that is a cause for bodhicitta. So that would not be correct as well. And then, getting depressed and upset and paralyzed by suffering and where we can't get out of bed because we, it's just too much what we're bearing all sentient beings suffering and wanting them to be free of it. And when are they ever going to be free of it? And their situation they're in is, is just completely too much. So it's not that as well. And it's certainly not striving for your own enlightenment. So bodhicitta has two aspirations, and its primary aspiration is for the welfare of all sentient beings. That's primary. For the welfare of all sentient beings, I will achieve enlightenment. But it's for the benefit of all sentient beings. That's the cause driving our action. Striving for enlightenment is because the causal motivation is for the welfare of all sentient beings. So we're not striving for our own enlightenment alone, not like that at all. We'll never achieve enlightenment with that. So bodhicitta is this, the mind that strives for complete enlightenment in order to be able to benefit all sentient beings. And so when it is uncontrived, spontaneous, and it just arises like instantly, we don't need to generate it with reasons and things like that. It just arises naturally, spontaneously. When it's uncontrived, at that point, one enters the Mahayana path of accumulation. It's at that point that they become a bodhisattva, when they have the mind, bodhicitta, the mind that strives for enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings. So one is a bodhisattva when one has bodhicitta, and necessarily they've then entered the Mahayana path of accumulation. So this mind of bodhicitta, what stops us being able to develop it? At the moment, our biggest obstacle is going to be our self-cherishing. Now, that's a word that is in a lot of texts, so I still introduce it, but you can think of it as in like self-centeredness, self-preoccupation, self-absorption. Any of those sort of words will be fine, and I'll use a combination of all so that self-cherishing as well, because it's still the common term that has been used in a lot of the texts. So what stops bodhicitta is self-cherishing, thinking about oneself and being consumed by my own happiness and what I want at the expense of others. Doesn't matter what they want. If I'm in a gompre and I'm hot, I want the fan on. If I'm cold, I want it off. We don't think about what others' needs are because we're consumed by my own needs and what will bring me happiness. And so that's why it's at the expense of others. Or disregards others. This is a critical part of the self-cherishing or the self-centeredness. So a self-preoccupation, excessive self-concern for one's own happiness and welfare at the expense of others. That's what we're talking about with this self-cherishing mind. And if you wanted to know bodhicitta, if you just want to think about this, what's bodhicitta? That which is the two aspirations. So, bring that to mind. It's a short definition, basically. Actually, I don't think you could say it's a definition, but it gives the meaning. What is bodhicitta? That which is the two aspirations. What are the two aspirations? For the welfare of all sentient beings, I will achieve enlightenment. There's your two aspirations. Remember, for the welfare of all sentient beings is the causal aspiration by which we then engage in the practices to bring about enlightenment so that we can then bring all others to that state. So why do we need this bodhicitta? Well, we need to become free of the complacency of nirvana. We need to enter the Mahayana path, whether it be a sutra or tantra path or both. It's practicing the perfection vehicle, then entering tantra or entering direct into tantra with the common paths already complete. A prerequisite to tantra, apart from having an empowerment or an initiation, is these three principal aspects of the path that we're learning about in the perfection vehicle and so forth. So we need to develop bodhicitta to overcome what hinders enlightenment, the knowledge obscurations, all those imprints of true existence that we see in every mind of every mind of a sentient being is mistaken, except that meditative equipoise, when they're non-conceptually realizing emptiness. As soon as the bodhisattva comes out of that meditation, everything appears mistaken again, as if existing inherently, truly, independently. They know now that it doesn't exist like that, and that's when they see things as like an illusion. But nevertheless, while you're a sentient being, a non-Buddha, every mind is mistaken with imprints of ignorance that throws up these mistaken appearances of true existence. And so, except for that one meditative equipoise, when you're in that, because you have the antidote present, you're realizing the lack of inherent existence. So if we're going to fully enact our own welfare and develop all the realizations, and not just a partial realizations, and fully abandon all obscurations, not just partial, like the arhat who achieves liberation, they only have partial realizations, partial abandonments. If we're going to achieve our own welfare and fully abandon and fully realize all that's to be known, and be able to bring sentient beings from their state of suffering to that enlightenment, then we need this bodhicitta. So just because we don't remember that we've had past lives and how kind beings were and all that sort of stuff, just because we don't remember these things is not a reason to basically, just because we don't remember that we've had past lives and all sentient beings have been kind to us as our mothers and our friends, our loved ones, and so forth. Just because we don't remember is going to be a valid reason for us to disprove how sentient beings have been kind to us in the past and in the present and in the future. So the kindness of sentient beings is what we're looking at. How have they been kind to me in the past? How have they been kind to me in the present? How are they kind to me in the future? That would be good homework to think about. So maybe you can write that one down, come up with some ideas how they've been kind to me in the past. Well, not only as my mother, right? And you can extrapolate all of the meaning behind all of that, unpack it. But also the fact that I have a precious human rebirth now has come about due to me being able to practice, for instance, the six perfections and non-harmfulness, non-harming other sentient beings, you know? So on the basis of ethics and a practice of the six perfections, these are in relation to sentient beings. And I've made aspirational prayers to achieve a precious human rebirth. So even just to have this very life comes from others. This body comes from others. You know, our mother and father gave us this body, sperm and egg, at the time of conception. They gave us the ears to be able to hear the Dharma, the tongue to be able to speak the Dharma, the eyes to be able to read the Dharma, the body to circumambulate holy objects, to the body to prostrate. The fact that we can accumulate so much merit has come about in dependence even just on our parents. Whether they abandoned us at birth does not matter, in the sense that they gave us this body. So even that alone is an amazing set of reasons of why they're so precious and kind and so dear, you know? So that's a difficult pill for some people to swallow, which is why I explained it like that. And it's irrefutable, because some people have difficulties, they haven't had the nurturing mother, or their mother figure was a grandmother or an auntie or something like that. So that can be a big obstacle in achieving bodhicitta, because, one's got this massive hurdle of not being able to see the kindness of the mother. So yeah, it's difficult to generate for some, but if we leave one sentient being out of our loving kindness, compassion, and so forth, we cannot achieve great compassion, great love, or even bodhicitta, and forget enlightenment without those causes in place. So it's a big hurdle. And so even just coming down to recognizing the kindness of just having ears and eyes and tongue and body and so forth is going to be a good start. Or the fact that they didn't abort me, that I had this precious human rebirth. So this can be challenging. All right, so what was I thinking next? Oh yeah, so I want to show you one more thing or more than one more thing, if you'll let me, if you'll indulge me. So, oh yeah, this is what I was thinking. So Dhammakirti, in Pramanavartika, valid cognition text, talks about how we can achieve enlightenment. And he says in there that we have the seed of compassion for all sentient beings in our continuum already. And I thought this was amazing, because I just found this really helpful, right? Because if we're going to enter the Mahayana and we need to develop great compassion that wishes all sentient beings to achieve enlightenment, then that's possible, because already right now we have the seeds to make that happen, because we have had beginningless rebirths in samsara. We've had beginningless lives where we've been born to parents, whether it be in human or animal realm and so forth. And at that time, we have had love for our parents, our family, our friends. We've had all kinds of relationships with sentient beings. If you think about the people you've had love for in this one life, and then go back previous life and extend your circle of love, and then go back to the previous life, extending your circle of love, it's going to reach out to encompass all sentient beings. That we have had love and compassion for every single sentient being at different times. But the bodhisattva is going to generate that love and compassion for all sentient beings simultaneously. And so this is going to be possible because we already have this love and compassion for all sentient beings, but just not at the same time. And so we can cultivate that mind of compassion and bodhicitta and so forth. We can cultivate that mind through meditation, life after life, and because the mind is a stable basis, it goes from one life to the next. And so we bring with ourselves, into the next life, the imprints we're creating now to continue our journey towards enlightenment. And so we can cultivate, habituate, accustom the mind to this type of meditation encompassing great compassion for all sentient beings, wanting them to be free of suffering and its causes, great love, wanting them to have happiness and its causes. And we can cultivate that in meditation so that we hold that space for all sentient beings simultaneously. So I thought this was really cool. Anyway, maybe I'm just a Dharma nerd, but anyway, if you like that too. So what have I got here? Ordinary love and compassion. So yeah, we do have love for all sentient beings from just not simultaneously. And we have seeds of love and compassion in our mind because we do have love for a select portion of beings. Right now, we love a selection of the sentient beings. It's love that's mixed with attachment. That's the problem. The problem is not the love. The problem is the attachment. If we can rid the attachment and only have the love and grow the love, then we're going to be going in a great direction. So at the moment, we're quite biased in our love for sentient beings. And if we're honest with ourselves, it's usually because somebody's done something kind to me or said something nice or given me something or recognized something about me, or, it's often me, me, me. It's often related to me, right? And if someone says something disrespectful, they can easily fall out of our friend and loved one category into someone who's a bit of an enemy. We're so fickle with our relationships, and it's all about how people treat me and what they say and do for me quite often. Now, this is not entirely true because the closest thing that we have to developing a great love, the closest thing that gets to that would be the unconditional love that, for instance, in the text we talk about that a mother has. It doesn't mean only a mother, it could be a father as well, right? The unconditional love that even when our child does something that we don't appreciate or respect, or maybe they harm someone in a really graphic way, a mother can still have love for her child. And so there's still going to be attachment, definitely, but there's going to be an unconditional love, whereas a lot of our love can be conditional. So the great love of a bodhisattva and the great compassion of a bodhisattva embraces all sentient beings, regardless of whether they're friends, enemies, strangers, what they do for me is good or bad or indifferent. And so right now, our love depends on others' attitude. If they're good and kind to us, then we'll show them affection. If they're unkind or hurtful or something, we'll show them angry, aversion, anger. But regardless of how sentient beings treat a bodhisattva, who has this bodhicitta and great compassion, great love, regardless of how a sentient being treats them, they will still have this immeasurable great love for them and great compassion. So even for their enemies. Okay, so irrespective of others' attitudes and actions towards them, just like me, they want to be happy and free of suffering. And so that's the mentality of the bodhisattva. So our ordinary love and compassion is limited to in its reach to however many people, whereas the great love, great compassion of a bodhisattva extends out to every living being without exception. Now, what else? So let me see. So yeah, what we want to do is try to move beyond our personal preferences and our prejudices and our bias so that we can cultivate this great compassion and great love for all others. So with this great love and great compassion is often cultivated through analytical meditation, which you've been introduced to, and coming up with reasons to support why they're a valid base to develop love and compassion for. And it comes, with this wisdom, so it becomes very stable, not fickle, where people will fall out of the friend category into the enemy category because they didn't do one thing for us or said one thing that was horrible. Even though all their actions prior were amazing and wonderful, it only takes one thing for someone to fall out of that category of our loved ones, our close ones, into the enemy category. So remember I was saying that with the developing the bodhicitta, the biggest obstacle we have is our self-centeredness. Okay, so if we can overcome that, and the opposite is cherishing others. Instead of cherishing oneself, we cherish others. Okay. Instead of having that self-centeredness that looks at me and my wants and forgets about others, disregards others as long as I'm happy, if we can overcome that by developing its opposite that cares and cherishes all other living beings, even just based on numbers, we are one, they are many. So surely the happiness of many far outweighs the happiness of one, you know, just based on numbers alone. So there's different techniques we can use for this. And I'm not sure what I've got here. So let me just see if I want to go through this. So we want to move beyond putting ourselves first and neglecting others, and we want to develop our heart out to have concern for others. So instead of me first, we want to go others first. We want to stop obsessing over ourselves with that preoccupation, which brings so much more suffering and isolation and all of these things. Everything that we don't want, we get when we have this self-centered mind. It brings, yeah, all the problems and harms and all of these sort of things. Whereas cherishing others brings all the qualities. So great compassion, great love, bodhicitta, enlightenment, and all of those aspects. We can develop the great scope, you know, the six perfections in everything in our mind, a massive, massive merit to accumulate the rupakaya and the form body, and the dharmakaya, the enlightened mind. So our self-centeredness is what makes enemies. It creates all the conflict and drama in our lives, and it stops our virtue from accumulating, destroys whatever virtue we've accumulated because we give rise to anger and so forth. It gives us no space to think about others when we're consumed by self-cherishing. We're just overwhelmed with ourselves. So we cannot even think about others or their problems and so forth. There's no space in our mind to have those sort of meaningful connections with others. It's all about me. So, whereas if we cherish others, we can develop all the realizations of the path. So one leads to the lower realms in samsara, one leads to liberation and enlightenment. Now, it leads to peace on a daily basis. Arhats who have achieved liberation, they do have self-cherishing or we call it self-cherishing, but they don't disregard others. So it's different to the self-cherishing that we have. So they do have self-cherishing to be abandoned, but they don't actively disregard others in the sense of, you know, not care about others. You know, they've developed immeasurable love, immeasurable equanimity, immeasurable compassion, and all of these sorts of things. They're not disregarding others in that dismissive sort of mind. So if we can develop this method of others first and ourselves second, if we can exchange one mind for another, exchange the self-centered mind for the mind that cherishes others, then we're going to be able to develop such a thing as this great compassion and great love and bodhicitta. So there are two methods that you guys do need to be aware of. One's called the sevenfold cause and effect method, and it's passed down from the Buddha through Maitreya, who's going to be the fifth Buddha of our fortunate eon. We're up to the fourth Shakyamuni, the fifth is Maitreya, and it's passed down from Maitreya to Asanga. So there's a sevenfold cause and effect method, and there's also the other method called equalizing and exchanging self for others. Equalizing and exchanging self for others. These are the two methods to develop bodhicitta. I want to sort of skip this one here. I'm just going to show you briefly the sevenfold cause and effect, but you can find that in any text. It starts with equanimity. Why? Because we just saw how our love was biased. It was only reserved for a few. It's dependent on how they treated me and so forth. We put everything into friend, enemy, and stranger categories. If they help me, if they harm me, if they don't do any help or harm, they're in, you know, we're indifferent to them. Then they're in the stranger category. So we have a level playing field to develop great love and great compassion and so forth. We need to level out, even out our mind and not have these categories. So, and then on the basis of a level field, then we can look at how all sentient beings have been our mothers since we've had beginningless rebirths to them and how kind they are. You know, you look at just the animal realm and how the kindness, look at penguins, the king emperor penguins and so forth, the kindness that the parents show to their chick. and all sorts of rebirths. Look at our human rebirths. Wishing to repay the kindness, developing love, may you be happy, compassion, may you be free of suffering. And not only those states, but have the causes for them. And this extraordinary thought is where, as the Bodhisattva, it says, I myself alone would take responsibility to make this happen, that all sentient beings have happiness in the causes and free of suffering in the causes. I will become a Buddha to make this happen. So it's this extraordinary thought that produces the effect of bodhicitta in their mind. So the extraordinary thought is an intensified great compassion, you could say. All right, so yeah, I don't want to go into this one now because I want to have a look at this method, the second method, equalizing, exchanging self for others. And the two methods can be combined into 11 steps, which is what Lama Tsongkhapa did. So it also has the aspect of immeasurable equanimity, but not just looking at the kindness of when a sentient being was our mother, but looking at the kindness of all sentient beings in all the various relationships we have with them. So, if you think about just the way we rely on sentient beings now, for our clothes, our shelter, our food, absolutely all of our needs, our hospital needs, our education needs, anything that we enjoy has come from the kindness of others, as well as all the qualities we develop and have developed, will develop, and so forth. So on the basis of equanimity, we had this equalizing self with others. And that's where that phrase, just like me, comes into it. We see the equality of ourself with others, how we're all equal in wanting happiness and wanting to be free of suffering. This is critical. So, we can see how they're equal, that there's no inherently existent friend, enemy, stranger. They're just labels we give based on, how someone has treated us in the past. Actually in just this one life, but in the past, they've been so kind to us as our mother and our friends and so forth. And even in this one life, as I was saying before, they can do so many acts of kindness and they do one thing and suddenly they're, flicked out of that category into the enemy category. So we equalize, we trying to get rid of that self-importance and bring it down to see, just like me, all sentient beings are in this suffering situation. Just like me, they seek happiness. Okay, so we're equalizing our needs, are being equalized to be comparative with the needs of all living beings. So we don't need to neglect others and focus on just our own happiness, but we're all in this together. Yeah, sentient beings are, as kind as the Buddhas. The Buddhas teach us the instructions for how to do things, but it's sentient beings that we put it into practice with. So in this way, sentient beings are equal to Buddhas. So we have respect for Buddhas. We need to cultivate respect for sentient beings, seeing how dear and precious and kind they are. We look at the shortcomings of our self-centered thought or our self-cherishing thought. We look at how, every suffering that we experience, any problems or whatever, has all come about due to this self-centeredness. And remember, it's the major obstacle to developing loving kindness and compassion, bodhicitta, and so forth. And then we look at the advantages if we were to cherish others instead. And if we cherish others, then there are so many advantages. Not only in this life is it much more happy, but we can cultivate these great qualities of the great scope, which will actually bring about enlightenment, not only for ourselves, but all sentient beings. Then once we've seen the faults of cherishing ourselves at the expense of others and the benefits of cherishing others, then we can see that's, since sentient beings are just like me and seeking happiness and freedom from suffering, we can see that we can make this exchange. So instead of me first, others second, we can exchange this and we can think others first. We can put ourselves last, if you want. Bear in mind, there's, countless sentient beings and we are just one. Like based on numbers alone, it has to win, the importance of others just based on numbers alone is very convincing. And then there's this amazing practice called Tonglen. Now, Tonglen, it says taking and giving, because taking is practiced first, then giving. But if you were to translate the Tonglen, it'd be giving and taking. Okay. But in practice, we take first and then we give. So what do we take? Well, we take from others all their suffering, all their problems, all their challenges, their sicknesses, illnesses, their sufferings, the three kinds of sufferings, the causes of suffering, karma and afflictions, true origins. We take all of that from them. Why? Why would we do that? It's because it's reversing our self-cherishing. It's reversing that self-centeredness that thinks about me and myself and only wants to protect me. So that mind, we imagine it like a hard rock at our heart, you know? This mind of self-cherishing, self-centeredness, we want to destroy that. And so to reverse that self-centered mind, to be able to focus on all others, then what we want to do is this practice of Tonglen. So we, motivated by compassion to free all sentient beings from suffering, we can imagine, it's only at the level of visualization at the moment. We see so much suffering in the world. If anytime you watch the news or anything like that, this is a perfect time to practice Tonglen. Motivated by the wish to free them from suffering and its causes, we can imagine that we take on others' suffering and the causes of suffering, even the imprints of suffering, with the in-breath. We imagine breathing in their suffering, and we imagine it comes in the form of this black smoke. And where does it come into? Right at the heart where the self-centered mind is, and it destroys the self-centered mind. So if you're sitting with somebody who's, maybe really sick, maybe they're in hospital, or maybe they're in palliative care or something like this, wherever you are, you can practice this. If someone's in a war zone and you're watching it on the news, we can imagine freeing them from the suffering and what's caused that suffering, their karma and afflictions. We can free them from that and breathe in. And we breathe in the black smoke, and we breathe it down to our own self-centered mind that cares about ourselves and only ourselves, really. And then we obliterate or destroy or smash that. So then with we can do it with the out breath, but I find that quite difficult to do one on the in breath, one on the out breath. So we might practice on the in breath, doing the taking for many breaths, right? Until we get used to it. If we become bodhisattvas in the future, then every moment of their breath is dedicated to the welfare of others. So they would be practicing this Tonglen all the time. But for us to get to that level, we might need to practice it independently, just the taking for a while, okay? And then practice the giving for a while. Eventually, we'll get so skilled we can do it on the in and out breath. So then with the giving, motivated by love, may you have happiness and the causes of happiness. That's the meaning of love, right? So motivated by love, we imagine giving away whatever is most needed for them right now. So if they're, having polluted water and all of these sorts of things, and no food and no medicine, no clothes, no shelter, we can imagine giving all of that to living beings. And not only the good conditions they need now, but they need all the conditions to overcome their suffering entirely. So we can imagine giving them Dharma teachers, Dharma texts, Dharma companions. We give them whatever is most needed by sentient beings. And we do that on the out breath, and we imagine it takes the form of this white light that goes out to touch the hearts of all living beings. So the sentient being in front of us and all sentient beings, we give them whatever is most needed. Okay, so this is a really beautiful practice. And with this taking and giving, ultimately it's to develop bodhicitta. And we can practice it now with ourselves. So you might think, oh, I've got so much suffering in my life, I can't bear to take on the suffering of others, right? That's great. That's self-cherishing. So now that you see that mind playing out, then you can start with yourself, and you can imagine freeing yourself from all the problems and difficulties and challenges that you have. And then it can leave, your body and your mind, and you can draw that in to smash that self-centeredness at the heart. And then you can imagine giving, bringing in all the things that you need to be able to benefit others and to overcome the difficulties and challenges you're facing. So you can practice it with yourself. That can be a starting point. Or if you feel that you can go beyond yourself, you can practice it with your loved ones. So if you're sitting with an elderly parent and they're experiencing great difficulty, you could practice it with them. And then you could go to something a bit more difficult. You could practice it with strangers. Even more difficult than that, you could practice it with the person that annoys you the most. Okay, so the difficult people that push your buttons and trigger you. And then slowly we're building up, increasing our practice to be able to practice it in relation to all sentient beings. So this is a very, 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 very beautiful practice. So I would encourage you to even begin trying that even today, tonight when you go, watching the news or any sort of suffering that you see, and just know that yeah, it's been practiced by many for a long time, and it's what the bodhisattvas do. So if we want to walk in their shoes and benefit sentient beings, and this is one of the practices that we can do. And particularly you saw it was part of that equalizing and exchanging self for others, that method of developing bodhicitta. All right, so just I'll do a little bit more conclusion and then we'll jump to some questions. So it's important to not get disheartened in our journey, because we are suffering, we are with difficulties and challenges and so forth. And sometimes they do feel so much, but we're never alone. And so we can use as we saw last week, we can use whatever suffering we have to generate renunciation. And going beyond that, we can try to emulate the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas appearing in this world, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama. If you've had the privilege to meet Lamas of Rinpoche and so forth, certainly you're the beneficiary of Rinpoche's kindness being associated with FPMT centers and so forth. So remember, we're not alone, okay? Because all the time there are numberless Buddhas and Bodhisattvas surrounding you, everywhere, loving you, guiding you. That is what they do. So remember, Buddhas know all phenomena. They know, for instance, any phenomena that exists, a Buddha's mind knows. So where there is a Buddha's mind, there is a Buddha's body. There is at least the wind that mind rides on from a tantric point of view. So wherever there is Buddha's holy mind, realizing, say, the glass and the emptiness of the glass simultaneously, a Buddha's mind knows this object. A Buddha's mind knows my thoughts, my feelings, my difficulties, my challenges, and the emptiness of all of those. So wherever there is a Buddha's mind, there is a Buddha's holy body, the wind that it rides on. And the speech, these three, body, speech, and mind, are going to be inseparable. So just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not the reality. Wherever we look, there are countless, numberless Buddhas and Bodhisattvas guiding us, having love for us, who have worked for countless eons for our benefit, for me. Can you imagine? So personalize it and think, they're doing this for me. So you're never alone. And this is always an energy that we can tap into and feel at any moment. So to move us in the direction of developing bodhicitta, using our post-it notes for good, what we can do is put up little reminders in our room, for instance. So, you can have one by the bed so that when you wake up, you think, may all sentient beings achieve the holy body of a Buddha. So these are just some practices that Rinpoche has taught to get us thinking about all sentient beings. Right now, we just groggily get out of bed and, maybe do our 3 prostrations if we're, taking refuge already. It's all for us, right? So instead of that, we're now trying to inspire our practice and develop our heart so that even waking up becomes a method for enlightenment. May all sentient beings achieve the holy body of a Buddha. If you've taken initiation, you can arise as a deity and all these sorts of things. You can have a post-it note also by your bed when you go to sleep, or even when you see a stupa, which represents the enlightened mind of a Buddha. So when you go to sleep, you can imagine as your last thought, may all sentient beings achieve the Dharmakaya. And as you go into sleep, what a beautiful motivation by which your dreams become virtuous, your sleep becomes virtuous. Instead of just, quite neutral, you're now cultivating virtue even while you sleep. So this can be beautiful. And the post-it notes are very helpful, I've found. And then you no longer need to rely on the post-it notes. It just becomes habit. When you're cleaning, doing dishes, cleaning windows, all of these sorts of things, you can imagine, for instance, washing away the stains of delusions of all sentient beings. We're bringing in all sentient beings. Instead of doing a mundane thing, like cleaning the dishes, then we're now creating so much merit because we're doing it with a bodhicitta motivation. So this is how we can use our ordinary, everyday activities to accumulate vast merit by thinking of sentient beings and their enlightenment. I love this one. When we go downstairs, I'm going down to liberate all sentient beings in the lower realms. And then when we come up the stairs, then I don't know if I've got this one on the next one, but when we come up the stairs, we can imagine also bringing them to enlightenment, or freeing them again from the lower realms to bring them to the upper realms, up all the way up to liberation and enlightenment. So we use whatever's happening around us with a bodhicitta motivation. When we close the door, I'm closing the door of samsara for all sentient beings. And I've just got one more. When we're walking or driving, this is also very lovely. We can imagine that we're going around all the holy objects of the 10 directions, even the past, present, and future. And we can imagine that they're on our right. In Australia, we go around a roundabout this way. And I would so adore the opportunity to put a stupa on every roundabout so that the cars are going around. I so want to do that, but it's probably not going to happen. I'll need council permissions and God knows what. But we can at least imagine that we're circumambulating. If you're driving a different side, you're going anti-clockwise, if you've got high Sogu Tantra, say Mother Tantra, you could imagine, they're all on your left side and you're circumambulating like that. But this is so beautiful. So it's like when you put your mind in this place of doing these activities, your mind becomes so full with this love and compassion and kindness and this great joy. And even though it's only visualized, you imagine these things. Nevertheless, through imagination, it affects us in a deep way. Just like if you imagined your favorite food, which I'm not going to waste time on right now, sorry, but it would trigger this. The saliva would build up and these sorts of things. There's going to be a physiological reaction as well, just through imagination. So if we imagine doing these things and keeping sentient beings in our heart all the time, then these things grow. So you can be creative and make up your own. These are some of the ones that Lama Zopa Rinpoche has used. And this way, all of our actions, whether we're at work for 8 hours, 10 hours, however long we work for, then all of our actions can be beneficial for sentient beings. Even getting dressed in the morning, putting on a belt. There's, you can think about method and wisdom and combining method and wisdom together. And there's so many ways to bring virtue. And then lastly, Rinpoche says that when you walk, walk with bodhicitta. When you sit, sit with bodhicitta. When you stand, stand with bodhicitta. When you sleep, sleep with bodhicitta. You see, he's a bodhisattva, right? Or he's more than that, but he's showing this aspect of bodhicitta, that every action, when you look with bodhicitta. Shantideva says, when you see a sentient being, see with the eyes of love. It's so, so beautiful. When you eat with bodhicitta. When you speak with bodhicitta. So we don't need to run off to the cave and think we're going to become this great renunciate. These everyday actions can be done with bodhicitta for the welfare of all sentient beings, to bring them to enlightenment. And when you think with bodhicitta. So even in our relationships at home, we can practice these kinds of things. So the person that you are perhaps sharing your house with and so forth, cohabitating with and whatever, or working with, that is one sentient being. And they are who you're working for, all sentient beings, right? So that one sentient being is a selection from the group sentient beings. And so you can use your relationship to practice causes for enlightenment, and in the way you love and cherish and serve and devote yourself in a loving relationship to a partner or your children and so forth. In the same way, you can think that you're doing that for all sentient beings. So that all of them can receive the happiness that you're able to offer to that one sentient being. And so if you experience problems, then you recollect karma and how, I'm experiencing the results of my negative karma and so forth. May all sentient beings be free of this. You can try to bring in as much value in your work situation, family situation as possible by bringing into mind these ideas of bodhicitta and the six perfections. Certainly when you take a vow, like let's say a lay vow, and let's say it's not to engage in sexual misconduct. Now, you've made a promise there in front of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, let's say, to not harm all sentient beings. They receive that protection from you that you will not engage in sexual misconduct in let's say adultery. So all sentient beings are receiving that protection from you. So this is how we can be using our morality to practice not only morality, but also giving, patience, perseverance. Things can get challenging, and still doing them with a joyfulness and concentration when we even prepare a meal and so forth. We can bring in all of these perfections right here and right now. And then what happens is our life becomes incredibly meaningful, and we're transforming any relationship into an opportunity to practice Dharma. So these are just some of the random thoughts that I compiled, thinking they might be of some benefit, hopefully. If no benefit, then at least no harm. So yeah, did you have any questions about anything that I've spoken about, for instance? I've overwhelmed you, haven't I? I hope not. Any questions, Damien? You've usually got a question. You didn't last week, though.
And no questions from me.
No questions? Sure. Sure. Okay, so if there's no questions, then we can go straight on to the dedications. All right, let me just go back into screen share. Okay, go straight to dedications. Oh, I did mention it would be good, I don't know if you heard, but it would be good to be reciting the three principal aspects daily and the foundation of all good qualities even daily. So if you can go and do those, you'll see where, for instance, the three principal aspects, where it brings out the renunciation, where it brings out the bodhicitta. And next week, we'll look at the correct view of emptiness. So this would be really good to be going through those two prayers on a daily basis. And also, if you're not already, since you're taking module 2, which you've already done, into your everyday life and going forward into throughout all the modules, it would be good to have a meditation practice that you're doing maybe 5 to 10 minutes meditation a day to start with, and then maybe 10 to 15 that you build up to. And so you want to be using what all the units that we've done so far to bring those forward with you. And also I looked at Venerable Angie, I believe, is this true? I think I saw this, that she introduced you to a prayer on the transforming a suffering life into a life of happiness, something like this. Is that correct? The one with the blessing of the speech and the mantras? Yeah. Because even just I think it's the first maybe 3 or 4 pages, they had the Lam Rim prayer. And you'll see how magnificent that is, because now you guys will be reading the Lam Rim prayer, and you can see how it's applying to the small scope, middling scope, and great scope, and so forth. So yeah, keep those things happening all the time. What was the second one to recite? The foundation of all good qualities. I put both of them in the chat last week, and the week before I put that one in as well. I can put it in again if need be, but I think you will have had them already. Okay, let's go to dedications. So we can think of the time we've shared, keeping our mind in virtue, trying to develop the mind. It's a lot more words than the second module, isn't it? The second module, how to meditate, whereas this is like presenting 84,000 teachings in the path. So this is a lot more conceptual work, isn't it? So rejoice that you're still here. You're delight in being able to develop understanding of the path, and then it can become really purposeful what we're meditating on. So, rejoice and think how amazing, how wonderful, this is so precious. And we can think that all that merit that we've accumulated in every moment of this session, we can pull together with all the merit of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the past, present, and future, the 3 times, into this one giant ocean of virtue. And we can dedicate that to all sentient beings' enlightenment. And also to increase our bodhicitta and wisdom realizing emptiness, etc. So we can think, may the precious supreme bodhicitta not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. May the precious view of emptiness not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. And then to realize the 2 stages of Tantra, generation and completion stages. May the precious realization of the 2 stages not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. Long life for His Holiness, incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world. May you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Swift return of Kabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losang father and sons, along with their lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of the infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the 3 jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Okay, so rejoice, delight, how wonderful. And yeah, well done. Good on you for hanging in there. So hope to see you next week.
Thank
And
you. Okay, Mom.
yeah, we just have one more week and then the retreat time, right? Yeah, which will be a Sunday for you guys, Monday for me. Yeah. All right. So yeah, think about your homework if you remember what it was. Certainly the same 2 as each time, but also there was another element of homework I gave throughout. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Good
you
night.
so much.
Thank you.
And,
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
babe.
you.
thank you.
Thank you.